I'd like to welcome everyone to the Emmaus Borough Council meeting. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Personal appeals, part one. Anyone have a personal appeal? Hearing none. Community minute. Does anyone want to give a report on the snow blast?
I would love to.
Thank you.
The streets were full, stores were full, Triangle was full all day. Great comments from merchants and vendors that were out and about. And Arts Commission did an amazing job with the community art project. There were artists everywhere in town. They had more artists this time than in past years. So they are progressing just the way we thought they would with new commission members, and they've got some really wonderful ideas for the rest of this year. So, and thanks to all the council people who came out, and it was just a really great day in Emmaus. So thank you.
Thank you. Good.
Also, the Historical Society, I popped in there. They were hopping. They had a lot of good people coming in. It was busy. They have some nice new displays changed out. So I advise anyone to stop in and see the Historical Society.
Nice. Anyone else for a community minute? All right. We have a special presentation tonight by the Visioning Committee Chairman Mike Gibson. I'd like to invite him up here, and he's going to show us what they've been working on.
So we'll probably want to move.
Yeah. You have 5 minutes for your appeal.
Michael Gibson, 230 Richie. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Council. Mayor Gilbert, thank you. Mr. Solicitor, Mr. Pepe. You probably can't read this now that Mr. Pepe has turned off, or someone has turned off all of the lights, but yes, it's on nonetheless. That means we'll pay attention up there.
Is this the same that's in our packet? Yes.
Yes.
So we don't need it. I mean, we do need it.
She's trying to save a tree.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson.
You're welcome.
Thank you, sir.
I read your PowerPoint. It's very well done.
Thank you. What I am passing to you is, I believe you all got in your packet, is the extended version with the notes. So you will, what I'm going to go through with you this evening will not have the notes, but I will certainly answer any questions pertaining to the slides or the notes. So this was a process that bubbled up from the Planning Commission. Mr. Pepe challenged the Planning Commission to come up with a visionary look of what Emmaus may look like, what are some of the needs, what are some of the changing demographics and the needs of those changing demographics moving 10 years out and beyond. So in the beginning of 2019 in January, we had a nice group of people that was developed through many solicitations through local organizations, churches, community groups, as well as the commissions and committees in the borough. We also were looking at residents as a key component of that, both short-term, recent residents, and long-term residents as well. So we met on a monthly basis to identify 9 areas. Now, I've condensed this and summarized it for you for the purposes of taking some of those and categorizing them into bigger components so that we can move forward in distributing this to council committees, to commissions, and hopefully out into the business community. So we came up with a timeline assignment, which is not going to be in the summary tonight, taking these out in priorities of A, B, and C. And as you see on the slide, we assigned what we thought were reasonable timeframes to accomplish some of these moving forward. I will say that one of the interesting things that came about this as we went through the process is many of the things that we were discussing have either already been undertaken by council and the borough staff, or are in the process of being accomplished. I want to thank Mr. Pepe too, because as we tackled each of the 9 key areas, he was able to supply us with either current or past studies that were put into Dropbox for us to be able to digest before we had those conversations on each of the key areas, so we could see what had been done, so that we didn't do another parking deck study, and what potentially was being done currently in 2019. So what we did is we assigned those, and we took into consideration a number of items when we put these timeframes. One, what's the financial reality that any of those can happen in a 1 to 2, 2 to 4, or 5 year plus? What's the availability of personnel to be able to accomplish them? And how many of them are going to be changed due to newer technologies, or getting ready for newer technologies, or just coordinated efforts to work with other things such as 5G and extending gas lines, as we'll talk about later. How do we coordinate that with other road work to make sure that we're not duplicating resources? So we did narrow those down into the 6 that you're going to see tonight, and these are the 6 I kind of took down from the much more extensive, and we have a few folks here tonight that sat through those extensive meetings. But to take each of these and break them down and then put them back into 6. You see, we talked about community utilities and the items that are covered under that. It typically is most of the infrastructure things in the borough and the coordination of extending or bringing in new technologies and utilities. We then went to the community services, which tied in with our emergency services, our parks and trails, and all of the other services that we provide as a municipality. You'll see a trend here too. We started with all the really sexy stuff. Sewer, water, garbage. What else did we cover, guys? We covered all the really good stuff up front. There was a purpose, because what we really wanted to do is understand what are the absolute infrastructure necessities that we needed in the borough to accomplish some of the stuff we talked about later. That stuff being getting into development, getting into transportation, because we kind of felt you need all that infrastructure first, and it is the probably most resource-heavy piece of everything that we discussed. Borough resource. Much of everything else we covered is either private-public partnerships or through private. So these are the 6. We broke these down, and you'll see that we broke these down then into individual actions. The purpose here is to be able to take these actions and start to strategically think as a planning commission, as a zoning board, as an arts and entertainment commission, etc., to how we want to move these forward in each of the respective council committees and commissions through the borough. Obviously, many of these will also have interaction, as we have here with 1.1. I do want to mention this point system, these numbering systems. If you all aren't familiar, we tried to align these to match up with 2 things. We went through a 3, possibly a 4-year process of developing the Southwest Lehigh Comp Plan, and you all remember those meetings that I got to come talk to you all about. We tried to align these to match up with the Southwest Comp Plan. Furthermore, these numbering systems and subject matters also correlate to the Build Lehigh Valley, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission, Future LV, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission just completed themselves. So we were trying to tie it all together, so we're coordinating, collaborating consistently with some of the other mechanisms throughout the valley and our region. So here we have 1.1. I'm not going to read through them because you've already had it. 1.2, the economical efficient sewage. And some of these are ones that Shane and I have had numerous conversations about the fun thing called MS4s. So this is stuff we're already doing. This process was also, I think, educational to all those 15 people that supported this initiative, because many of them, whether they be business, residents, or residential property owners, didn't know some of this stuff was happening. board didn't understand or have full knowledge of what it was. So it was really kind of eye-opening to many of them. You'll see here we just continue through. One of the things we are looking for into the future, we've had some conversations at Planning Commission, is encouraging the utilities to put thoughtful 5G in our community. So we were looking at what are the needs of future generations, future emergency services. Next category we went into was community services. Maintaining high-quality parks, bike and walk trails. Again, some of these are consistent. We were looking for opportunities to create actions. We call them our Christmas wish list items that correspond with the availability for grant monies. Coordination with the county and state to receive some funding for accomplishing some of these items. We also, I just want to mention, 2.2. I think you'll see in your notes that we came up with a resource center name as opposed to library. We all understand libraries are transitioning and trying to understand what that means to future generations and current youth that are using it as well as adults. And maybe just a rebranding of the libraries to be more consistent with today's needs. Here we see some of the fine community services we already have throughout the borough. How many of you use these? So we need to get more people using them, or you just didn't want to raise your hand because I'm exhausting you with this presentation. So here are some of the other, I applaud the borough. By the time we had 2.3, the economic, encourage environmental responsible and economic solid waste disposal, you had already contracted with Whitetail, who sends that down to the Covanta plant for waste to electricity generation. Community services, and 2.5, which, again, back to that rating system, this is a C project. C being 5 years plus. We recognize that, you know, there's really not a hazard response center or community center for borough residents to go should there a situation arise. Here we see some of key area 3 was our natural resources. This one was starting to get a little more fun and interesting because we started to all understand what wonderful resources we have here and how we need to protect them. This particularly became an interesting topic as we started to move from it into development. One of the challenges the Planning Commission as well as zoning face is how to balance development and the need for a reliable, steady source of income for the borough, and also protecting some of the resources that development abuts in the borough. We're experiencing that with the Wawa project, where we were protecting the Liverts Creek, or Crick, depending on where you're from, as well as the proposed project with apartments up on South Mountain. And here you see one. This took forever to find one without geese in it.
I don't know what you're referring to, sir.
It did. Thank you for putting it on the website. This was a quick one. Colin and Todd, I think, didn't we throw this in with natural resources? It was so short.
Probably.
So I got some odd looks when, and Chad was there too, when I said we're going to cover agriculture in the borough. So we realized we have this wonderful community garden. I've had the privilege of sitting through CRD meetings where Craig Smith has stepped up to want to chair an initiative to kind of grow and take ownership of the community gardens. So one of our initiatives here is, why don't we have more of those through the borough? So that's the extent of our agriculture. You won't see a 4.2. And then we got into some of the more obvious key areas. As we got into development. Now development we broke into much finer key areas. We talked about future development. We talked about current looks, feels of development, where to properly place development, the need for perhaps rezoning or changing zoning. One of the topic items which you'll see in the notes is, and I will say, report that the Planning Commission is making it one of its initiatives for 2020 is to look at a hybrid form-based zoning to make neighborhoods look more complete when buildings are taken down and new are put in their place, or the few vacant lots that we have, that the new building looks consistent with the neighborhood. So we did get into here, and that's part of, 5.1 is where the environmental and natural resource piece ties back into development. Planning Commission and certainly zoning and council are always cognizant of making sure we protect all of the areas in natural resources throughout the borough. Directing uses where appropriate, that's a tough one in the borough, but we do have some brownfield areas that could be redeveloped. We want to make sure that the use is appropriate and consistent with the neighborhood. We also have, this is a favorite saying of one of our Planning Commission members, we also have a lot of garage apartments. It's not a term you're going to find in your notes because we didn't use it in here. But we have to understand the significance of taking a property and subdividing off the backyard and putting an ancillary, either for sale or for rent property on there, the impact that has to the neighborhood as well as the entire community. We also are fortunate in this borough to still have a pretty robust industrial area that produces some very nice businesses as well as impact of incoming employees. Now, 5.3 was kind of unique, and y'all remember I came back some time ago and I said, we're still struggling with figuring out the identity and the feel or look of Emmaus. You're not going to find it in the notes because we still didn't figure it out from the last time I was here to this time. So that one will take some work. We are very unique because we are very eclectic. If some of you might have seen, Easton just recently has struggled with, they've gone so much into the arts and food that they struggle for office space. Has anybody been down to Phoenixville in the last year or two? No? Has anybody know where Phoenixville? Okay, thank you, Colin. Crowd participation is encouraged. If you haven't been there, they have revamped their entire Main Street into, again, sort of a foodies kind of craft brew vibe down through Main Street. We're much more eclectic than that, because depending on where you are in the borough, you get a different look, a different feel. We talked about the extent of being able to identify as you move out from the triangle when homes were built. And you can watch the progression and see the change from rows to twins to single family and the era in which they were constructed. So we are going to have to look, probably the best place is council to figure out, as well as with the business community and some of the council committees, what's the look going to be in the future. I do want to say that whatever that look or feel may be, is we also benefit from a lot of traditional business here. We have a lot of long-time businesses. We have a lot of long-time looks and feels to buildings. This is just an example of what perhaps blocks could look like if we were to go up instead of out. Because again, as a landlocked community, it is difficult to increase population and density by going out because our borders are pretty much filled to the border. These are some tough ones. 5.5 really now starts to go to some of the ordinances. We start to get into, do we have the right zoning in areas? I know over my time on the Planning Commission, which I think is about 40 years, I'm pretty sure, we've seen lot line adjustment because we have that unusual industrial piece that's sitting in the middle of a residential community, and it's just out of place. There's not as much of that left in the borough, but those are some of the things we need to look at to remove them and make it consistent. Additionally, and we had a lot of lively conversation about how do we encourage developers to come. We don't have the financial incentives of Easton, Bethlehem, Allentown, Lancaster. We don't have that capacity. What we do have is the ability to be flexible with our ordinances to encourage different types of newer businesses or different types of developers to want to come in and perhaps put something, as I showed you on that previous slide. And we've also, I know Shane and Jim Farnsworth, as well as Planning Commission, have been working on a blighted properties list to be able to, as we have here on 5.7, figure out what properties don't meet that feel, that look, that aren't being consistently kept up to encourage the neighborhood to improve the look and the maintenance of their properties. 5.9, I just want to put that in some context for you. We are not talking about setting design standards here. This is not, you can only paint your property a colonial blue if it's on a triangle. But we want to, again, through a hybrid form base, be able to make houses look consistent. If there is a green space in the middle of a block, if that doesn't become a high-rise apartment in a neighborhood full of single family or twins, or that every house on the block is either stone or brick, and this one's going to have, bright orange aluminum siding. So, in a more simplistic, we've talked about setbacks. I'm sure you all can drive up a street, walk up a street, and you see the one or two houses that were built differently from everything else, and they're set back further. And it looks inconsistent, it looks unusual, it looks different. Form base makes everything come to a built-to line as opposed to a setback. So everybody builds to the consistency of the neighboring homes. This is not about telling people what color roof shingles and what color brick, and what color siding. We realized, and I will say through the process, one thing I do want to add is that we had, in some of these, when we started to talk about design standards and form-based ordinances, we did have professionals come in and talk to us about it. What will work, what won't work, what we're allowed to, what we're not allowed to, so that we didn't put anything in this plan, in our Christmas wish list, that would be unattainable. Here's again another example of some nice mixed use, some attractive retail, commercial, office on the first level with additional leased or condoed space above. Window boxes are optional. When Colin builds those, he'll let you know what you pay extra for a window box. But this is a look that works very well for boroughs. It's very easy to build when you have the developers that are interested in coming and doing it. Now, I had Main and Chestnut on there. I think that's a look that could also work up on Broad Street. There's a lot of other applications. Here again is just some additional development. I do applaud council. You did a really wonderful job, as did zoning, on finally doing something with the Furnace Street property that's sat as a brownfield and has become a nuisance for community services and emergency services. So 5.15, as I said, we're already doing some of those things and already ahead on this vision. 6.1 was our transportation for freight, road, bike, and pedestrian. We all know the challenges in some of the intersections in the borough, and certainly as Council and Public Works, as well as the committees, have worked diligently to try to address some of the more dangerous crossing. But we're also a unique municipality because we're dealing with a truck. Our two primary routes are not our roads. We have freight going through every single day, a lot of times during the day. We discussed all of it. We talked about banning trains. Just seeing if the rest of the vision is paying attention. No. But there was good conversation about appropriate times for whistles. So there was conversation about it. Obviously, we know that all of this is also necessary for our economy, for moving goods and product around. We, again, have a very vibrant industrial sector here in the borough, some of which need all that logistics to get their product in and out. I'm going to go to 6.3. This became a lively conversation again. We did this over breakfast, so most of the people were pretty tired. It didn't get lively until they had like their second or third cup of coffee. But this one is more of an enforcement of existing laws. We were also trying to be cognizant to not create new ordinances and laws to further complicate the work of our fine police force. The effort here was really to understand where are some of the challenges. When people park on the corners in the yellow zone and pedestrians can't see cars coming and cars can't see them coming. Delivery trucks that park right in the middle of the road, and again, cars can't see pedestrians, pedestrians can't see cars. Those are challenges, those are issues. Those are problems that have existing rules, existing laws, and the business community chooses in some cases to not enforce them and let their vendors park where they please, let their customers park where they please. So this is more of enforcement, not creating new. Here's some examples of some very colorful pedestrian and bike corridors. We did also understand that, again, the challenge of an older community like Emmaus is it's very difficult to put those bike lanes in. They work on Harrison, they maybe work on Broad, they work on some streets, they don't work on Main Street, they don't work on Chestnut. It's going to be very difficult to make that work. I will say one of the things we were hoping to do, and you'll see it in your notes, is to push bike traffic off of the roads that don't support it. Is to move it to Harrison and look at a possibility of doing some bike lanes like this to encourage those folks to go out there, bike, jog in the lanes on roads that are appropriate. Less traveled, wider cartways. Does anybody like that lime green color? Is that available on the road marking? Does public roads have access to that color? Okay. So that slide can stay in because we can get that color. Did you see the other one? You don't like that one either?
Oh,
You don't like
yeah.
that one? That one's pretty wide. I don't know if I've ever been in the borough and seen that many people at a corner, so I don't think we need to make it that wide. But can we make it that color? No? Oh. This one's a little more conservative. Arts and entertainment might like that.
If they want to go out in the middle of the road and paint it, you know.
They can't, it's too dangerous right now, I just got them saying that.
What's that in the middle of that?
Looks like some sort of flower.
It's a flower.
I'd be tempted to hop in the middle of the lane.
We can skip the flower. There are literally thousands and thousands of examples of this, and I'm sure you've all seen them from, yeah. Well, now you gotta worry, someone's gonna stop and think they can really play that. And that's a problem. But there are lots of examples. This is just, again, to show some of the areas in which we may have to get a little more creative. One of the challenges I think we discussed is that the vehicular traffic gets comfortable or complacent with seeing the same crosswalks. I can't tell you how many times I see now at the library the new crosswalk with the pedestrian crossing. What's the technical term for the thing that people keep hitting and it stands upright? People? No, not people, the sign.
Yeah, that's the
It's
crosswalk.
just a
sign.
crosswalk.
Traffic marker, pedestrian marker.
People actually get out and move it because the roadway, the cartway is narrow and they can't figure out which side they're supposed to go on that thing, so they get out and move it. I see it's on the side of the road, on the sidewalk, and I don't know if Public Works did that, or somebody got out and moved it. But that's not how crosswalk safety is supposed to work. So we've thought about some other creative ways to do it. What are our next steps? Well, over the next 90-day period, we'd like to take this presentation and have public hearings here at Borough Council, possibly out of, Borough Hall, possibly outside Borough Hall, to get feedback. What are people's thoughts? What would you like to see that's here that could potentially be a reality in the near future in that 1 to 5 plus time frame? And what did we miss? You know, the 15 of us didn't have all the answers. We thought we did. We pretended like we had all the money to spend and just came up with a big wish list. I didn't put it in all of your notes, but these are broken down, the actions are then broken down into measures. How do we take these, create a measure to make them happen? The goal is to do that once this is vetted through public meetings, is to take that and do the same, create measures so that the commissions and Borough Council committees can potentially start to work these in as you're having your budget conversations. You know, are we going to take the priority A items and make them happen in the next year or two? How does it fit into the budget? What grants may be available to offset that? And so forth through each of those. But we also need full buy-in. I know we have the support of council, or else you wouldn't have asked planning commission to undertake this exercise. Our goal is to obviously get residents buy-in, and certainly the business community, because they're as important as the residents, if not more so, because much of this is going to impact their business and the growth of their business. So we do want to make sure that organizations like the Main Street Partners, Historical Society, and all the other organizations throughout the borough are supportive as well. Anybody have any questions? Any input? I already know we're not doing any of those crosswalks. Yes?
I just want to say, as a young person, like if I was in the market for a house and I saw that a community had 5G, I'd be extremely interested, especially now that 5G is becoming available for more technology. I think that would be extremely amazing to have.
Thank you, Charles. We appreciate that.
Do you have your dates set for the community?
We do not. I wanted to make sure we presented this to council first and get your feedback before we take this out to set up public meetings. I'll coordinate with Mr. Pepe to advertise those and get them out, as well as the Main Street Partners. And I'm sure we'll mix up the days and times so that we have plenty of access for people's schedules.
I was going to say, I think a place like the library outside of here might be a good gathering place.
We need something big. I'm expecting a huge crowd, at least 40 times bigger than today.
So, Mr. Gibson, thank you. This is excellent. And I think just knowing what it started with all of the pages and pages of notes and the conversations, there was a lot to drill down. And you've made it really easy for all of us, I think, to digest. I'm very excited to get it out to committee because there's so much of this that we've already talked about at committee level, and to kind of really do a deep dive independently of council on a whole. I think it bears repeating, though. Mr. Pepe sits on the Blight Task Force. As you had mentioned very early on, the Lehigh Valley Planning Commission already has so much of this that they have suggested that towns and boroughs like ours take advantage of. But there's also the Let's Walk and Roll.
Lehigh Valley.
Lehigh Valley. So this is perfect timing for our community to start really having those meetings, because there's so much that's happening in the newspaper right now and in the public across the Lehigh Valley. So timing is everything, and I think that for us, and certainly it's going to be a tough year just for budget, we're going to be able to really get into this a little bit more for 21 and onward. So but thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman.
Mhm.
Anyone May I just ask the other gentlemen that are here from the visioning committee if I missed anything and if they'd like to add?
I had a couple.
Hold on, they didn't give me permission yet.
Oh,
I will.
think everyone knows.
Colin
Hi,
Clements?
I'm Colin Clements. I was one of the members of the visioning committee. One of the things I just want to point out, there's so much stuff, like we spent months digging and people jumping off and doing their independent research and then coming back and sharing it with the group. But some of the points like you were making about rethinking zoning, one thing that we learned from the woman that you had come in to speak to us from the Lehigh Valley, I wouldn't say it, Planning Commission, was that they found with their developments in Easton and downtown was that it was important to allow some level of flexibility from a creative standpoint, which I think Mike was addressing, while also just kind of building a basic parameter for people to stick to. When they found that they got too specific as far as dictating whether things should be colonial or whether or not things should be modernized, that it kind of discouraged development, and they found they actually got a greater result by allowing some flexibility while establishing some of those basic parameters like Mike was addressing, where you have like a build-to line, where you lay out some basic safety things and technological things that need to happen, and then you kind of say, all right, from this point, it's an open canvas, you can do what you want. That was another issue she had talked about was with the garage apartments that they saw a really significant detrimental impact in communities where they had allowed that to continue. They tend to encourage crime and just more distressed living conditions. So I think that was an important point to weigh in why to allow it or disallow it. And then I wanted to point something else out with, I don't know, the process going forward would be for laying out some of the walkability things that we had discussed, like bike paths and things. But there were some links that I had shared with Mike and some that I had shared with Shane of other cities that had done studies similar to this, where they found really inexpensive ways to like lay out examples of what some of the improvements could be with temporary cones or movable trees and things like that, so the community could actually interact with it and make a decision once they actually physically interacted with some of the proposals. And they found that they had a much higher level of satisfaction and support from the taxpayer after they physically interacted with some of the proposals, because you're not making them permanent in advance of people experiencing them. So those were just some of the bigger things that I just wanted to add. But there's a lot of stuff to go through. I mean, we literally spent months, and I don't think we even scratched the surface of everything. We really kind of pump the brakes at times, but that's all I gotta say. Thanks.
I'm just telling you, I'm Todd Ackerman. And I think it was just to lay out a group of strategic priorities to assist council and the community in giving priorities and giving budget priority to certain areas or not. It's a framework to be expanded upon. It's not a detailed plan by any means at this time, but we'd like to pick and choose a lot of those things in guiding us forward to put priorities or just people to put resources to look into and investigate. Some of those things don't cost money; they just cost people's time and effort to get them done.
I just want to conclude that the one thing that I found interesting from the whole process is that we have a wonderful, vibrant, diverse community here that very few people know about. When we started showing and talking about the trails, the community garden, some people didn't know in the group that we had a community garden. That information is not getting out. I think a common theme through this whole process is that the Borough of Emmaus, with all the organizations are here, need to improve upon getting out the message of all the wonderful assets that are here in this community. And that goes to the field of how do we promote all of that? And we've made some strides with the Emmaus Main Street Partners, with their welcome packet, with your new borough website.
You mean like maybe a 16-page newsletter that we do every 3 months?
I hear
That
you.
nobody, if they read it, would know that we have all those things?
I hear you, Councilman, I do. It's a struggle.
We can't make them read it.
But again, it's a You know, the interesting thing too is that many people are coming to the borough of Emmaus from out of Emmaus. So those mechanisms are a tool for those that live here, but they're not a tool for those that don't live here. And part of this vision isn't just for the community that lives here. It's how do we get those that are going elsewhere to come here and experience all the wonderful things that are in Emmaus. You heard Councilwoman McManaman talk about, and Councilman Andrews talk about the wonderful snow blast. There's all of that activity. There's the trails. There's the Furnace Dam. There's all of that here. I happened to say to Shane, because I felt silly, we found a park that I didn't even know existed in the borough.
Lower
This
Park?
was. Is that the one, where was that, over behind what used to be Brits at the gas station?
Oh,
Oh,
that's
Street.
8th Street.
Yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
We used to call that,
no idea.
we used to do Point basketball there.
Yeah,
West
basketball
End.
court and a small,
What about?
West End.
Yeah, West End.
West End, West
Correct.
End Cubs.
correct.
Yep.
So all those wonderful little pockets of assets exist. And the residents don't know it, the people coming here don't know it. We see how vibrant Funk's, Triple Sun, Yerby's are, Switchback, all those places Thursday through Saturday. And then those folks go home and they don't, best of our knowledge, don't come back for any other purpose. Because we haven't made all of this stuff here aware to them. So I know that's the daunting part, is how to get that out, get that message out, get people here. I don't have the authority to recognize people.
Can I add something on top of that, addressing that concern?
I give you permission.
Is that okay?
What's that?
I'm asking for permission to say something.
That's him.
It's your presentation.
Yes.
Well,
Mr. Clemens.
with the concern, with concern of maybe lack of readership surrounding the paper, there were some stuff that we had discussed, and again, these were all spitball ideas, throw them out there and see what people liked, and that conversation I don't think is over by any means, but we had discussed things like very basic apps that people can communicate with the borough through them, that would also, if you have the app on your phone, you have, that instant access to read about current events, you can get push notifications that, hey, there's a snow blast, hey, there's something special going on in the triangle, there's a new ordinance change where we could really increase the accessibility of the borough as well as the spread of information. And then another thing that we had discussed, which again spitballing, was signage for some of the more the community areas like parks or bike paths where there might be key points in the borough where you have, a decent permanent sign in place that somebody could actually stand in front of it, like a mall map, and say, oh, look, there's a bike path right there, I didn't know it was there. And it's, it's a permanent fixture, it's just a nice amenity, it doesn't cost a lot of money. But those were some of the things that you probably find in Mike's report to address issues like that with the lack of flow information. Thank you.
Councilman Hart, you have a question?
Yeah, Mike, I'm not going to repeat Mrs. McManaman's accolades that she extended to you, but I would point out something. Communities slightly larger than us and larger would have full-time salaried planners doing what you're doing in your committee. We're very fortunate to have you all involved in serving as volunteers, and we certainly appreciate it. You've done an outstanding job here. Thank you.
Thank you. Did I understand you wanted to pay me to do that?
That's all I want to
Oh, great, Mr. Hart.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks. Thanks, Mike.
That was very funny.
I'd like to thank Chairman Gibson for his leadership and the committee for all their time and their input and their thoughts. We know it takes a lot of time and we appreciate it, so thank you. All right, moving on to the reading of the minutes. We had council meeting minutes from January 20th. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve the minutes? Councilman Dufresne, seconded by Councilwoman McManaman. Any discussion on the minutes? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. There are 7 ayes. We had no decisions on bids. I have 4 communications. We received a letter from Ms. Kane from the Run Lehigh Valley requesting to hold the Emmaus 5 Miler June 6th. That's a recurring event, so that will go to staff. We received a letter from Keith Plunkett requesting to hold a charity bike ride on March 28th. It's the 2nd year they're having that. We'll send that to staff. Jeremy Winch sent a letter of resignation from the Joint Environmental Advisory Council. Like to send a letter to him thanking him for his service, and that will create an opening there. I believe we might have some candidates from that, from maybe the library board that we interviewed some people there, maybe?
Possibly.
Just let them know there's availability.
We have 2 openings there now.
Okay. And then we received a letter from Ashley Laura from the Main Street Partners for a new event they're having. It's called the Emmaus in Bloom, and it's May 16th. And I'll send that to the Parks and Recreation Committee because they're meeting tomorrow and they can address it tomorrow.
There's actually several other events in there. We just have the committee look at all of them, even though most of it.
So they're not all on that same day?
No, I think they have like 4 or 5 different requests in there.
Oh, Tunes on the Triangle is another one, and there's multiple dates.
Yeah. Old Fashioned Christmas, Farewell to Summer, I think it's all in there.
It is. So they'll handle all those then. All right, anyone else have a communication to bring forward that they received? Hearing none. Borough Engineers report, we have none. Solicitors report.
Mr. President, I've been working diligently on a wireless agreement with Verizon. A lot of it deals with 5G and also a brand-new statute that was passed to really streamline it and take away many of your powers to regulate the placement and the conditions surrounding them. So I'm trying to figure out how we will proceed, and I will work with Shane about on it, and we'll see where we can get it and then get it to committee. That's all I have.
Thank you. We have no unfinished business, part 1. We have no new business, no unfinished business, part 2. Items not on the agenda. Does anyone have anything to bring forward? Hearing none. Mayor's report.
Thank you. On 2 separate occasions, Chief Palmer hosted a local Girl Scout troop, along with Cub Scouts. I believe it was Troop Pack 80 from St. Anne's, and he gave them tours of the department, and that was back in January. And on February 3rd, the department received a $2,000 donation from the Mercantile Club, which we will use towards our community outreach program. Other than that, progress.
Nice. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Committee reports. We have Public Works Committee, Chairman Anders.
Nothing for official action this evening. Our next meeting is February 12th at 4 p.m. I will be absent from that, but Councilman Labenberg and Balliet will still have the meeting. I'll report progress.
Thank you. Health, Sanitation, and Codes Committee, Chairman Balliet.
Mr. President, I have nothing for official action tonight. Just some good takeaways from our first reorganization meeting on our goals. We're going to research and try to rewrite outdated codes and ordinances. We're going to look into what grants might be available in 2020, the continuing support of Earth Day. We had some good conversation about the Board of Health of bringing some new ideas into that, and also having someone from zoning and codes attend each of our committee meetings to work on those codes and ordinances with us. And besides that, we're going to continue to lay the groundwork as a team to produce great things from this committee.
Thank you.
Progress, and our next meeting is going to be February 19th at 4:30 here.
Thank you. I read your meeting minutes, and I'm excited to see what you guys are going to be able to do.
Yeah, I think we.
A lot of good ideas there.
Thank you.
Parks and Recreation Committee Chairwoman Baumgartner.
We have nothing for official action. We're meeting tomorrow, February 4th at 4:45, where we'll be discussing the pool study and the Parks and Trails study progress. And that's it.
Tomorrow, Roy.
4:45.
Tomorrow.
4:45. Tomorrow, Roy.
Put it in
Hereby
the thing called a phone.
Roy showed up today at 4:45 for the meeting.
I had it in my phone.
He was
Wrong
prompt.
day. A little early.
Oh, wrong day, okay. Public Safety Committee Chairman Hart.
To get started.
Thank you, Mr. President. We had no committee meetings since the last council meeting, and I have nothing to bring before council. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 10th at 9:15 a.m. I report progress.
Thank you. General Administration Committee is myself. We have Resolution 2020-7, the Wawa easements. There's 3 separate easements. One is a sewer easement, and the other 2 are stormwater easements. The resolution is a resolution accepting and approving certain easements in connection with the Cedar Crest Chestnut Development LP Land Development Plan for proposed convenience store. Would somebody like to make a motion to approve the easements? Councilman Dufresne, second by Councilman Anders. Questions or discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. There are 7 ayes.
This is a resolution that everyone needs to sign.
Yes, we all need to sign. We have our committee meeting notes that you can read, and our next meeting is February 13th here in council chambers at 9 a.m. Progress. Budget and Finance Committee, Chairman Dufresne.
All right, the first thing on our list here is the bill list. Just to let everybody know here, we had been having 6:45 p.m. meetings to approve the bill list. We're going to cancel those going forward. The 1 or 2 times a year that something else comes up that we have to look at, we're going to use the 6:30 time frame that Shane already has, a public slot that any of our committees can meet here. So we're canceling that because the Budget and Finance Committee is now meeting twice per month. And if any of us have any question on the bill list, we can always ask the questions here, just like we do now. So we are canceling that going forward here. So with that, we do have the bill list, so I'll make a motion for Resolution 2020-6, the bill list, to authorize payment of the February 3rd, 2020 bill list. The total amount of the list is $525,566.71.
There's a motion by Councilman Dufresne, seconded by Councilman Hart. Any questions on the bill list? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. There are 7 ayes.
Okay, then we have the significant revenue and expense items there in your packet. And we also have the letter from the general authority. So for that, we make a motion to authorize the borough manager to request funds from the general authority.
There's a motion by Councilman Dufresne. Is there a second? Councilwoman McManaman. Discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. There are 7 ayes.
You can see the committee meeting notes there, unless anyone has questions. Our next meeting is February 13th at 11 a.m., and I report progress.
Thank you. Community Relations, Planning and Development Committee, Chairwoman McManaman.
Thank you, Mr. President. Nothing for official action since last we met. We will be rescheduling our next meeting, which should have been next week, and we'll report on that date. And I report progress.
Thank you. Junior Council Members Report. Junior Councilman Hausman.
Thank you. Emmaus High School had 38 students receive awards of some kind at the Scholastic Art Contest. Emmaus had 21 gold keys handed out, along with 27 silver keys, 34 honorable mentions, and 2 American Vision nominations. Hello Dolly tickets are on sale this spring musical. Snow Code Dance is coming up for February February 8th for 9th and 10th graders, and for 11th and 12th graders, it'll be February 22nd. And 23 students from Mays High School made it into regional chorus. With that, I report progress.
Thank you. Under boards and commissions, we have 9 various meeting minutes. There's some reports in there, and just keeping us updated on what they're all doing. Personal appeals part 2, anybody have an appeal? Hearing none, Borough Manager's report.
I hired 3 individuals for the ambulance corps. Jordan Berry will be an EMT with us. Brian Flavo and Colin Brown will both be paramedics. Very happy to report that Colin is a young man that has worked his way up through the system. Exciting to see, what their future career goals are, and hopefully we can help, do our part in their future success. But very excited to have all 3 on board. We feel that they're all 3 very qualified and will add to the department and fill some of those vacant areas where we're struggling to have manpower. So you can read the hiring memo if you haven't already. Other than that, as I'm sure you noticed, you didn't have a whole lot to vote on at the committee level, but you have a whole lot going on. So I think it's going to be a busy next couple of months for you. I think there's going to be a lot of information flowing back and forth. So just keep up, ask questions. And our 2 studies are also getting ready to take off too. So we have those in the middle of it. So I think it's an exciting time, and it builds off of exactly what Mr. Gibson spoke about today. We have a lot of this going on already. And the beginning stages of a lot more. So I think what we're already doing speaks a lot to what people in the town are looking for. And us trying to coordinate that, I think, is going to be important, and trying to deliver on some of the things that they said. I think it's disappointing, but I think also opportunistic for us to hear that a lot of the town doesn't know some of these awesome assets that we have. And even though, as Mr. Liebenberg, you had pointed out, yes, we do this award-winning newsletter that's won state awards, there are other ways that people get their information today. How many of us actually have a print version of the newspaper? I don't, but I do have a digital version. There are other ways that people communicate that I think we need to probably explore too. And I know that Ms. McManaman and I had spoken about an app or a text version of those communications, and some other things that I think we're at least in preliminary discussions about that we need to look at. And I'm excited to see what that final report shows. I really am. I think that the work that they did, when they talked about months, let's back up. I challenged them over a year ago. They've been working on this for the better part of an entire year, not just months. So this is something that led by Mr. Gibson and that entire team, has been a year-long process for them, if not more. So it's exciting to see the work that they've done, and the opportunities that can come out of it. So I'm excited to see exactly what can happen there. And obviously, as he pointed out, we have limited resources, but there are opportunities to work within those resources and find other resources to do it. So again, thank you. Very exciting to see what we can do with the information that we've gotten. And I'll report progress.
Thank you.
Mr. DeFranos.
Shane, I'm correct that the RFP for anyone interested in 33 East Minor is available?
Yes,
For them
that posted in the newspaper on Wednesday of last week. So we have the package together. I have to make the files smaller in size so that we can send it electronically for anyone that might be requesting the package.
And I think you're going to advertise it a couple more times, too.
It's going in 3 or 4 times, and we also have notifications out to a bunch of realtors. And we're sending more out.
The more we talk about it, the better.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Anything else for Shane? All right, under President's business, just to piggyback what you were saying about the visioning committee, I really like the idea of the app, and if you can send out like mass texts